Welcome to Paradigms at paradigms.life, the radio show and podcast that brings you inspiring people with visions of a viable future for life on Earth that includes humans. Welcome to the show. I'm Baruch, your host. Thanks for being here. In this episode, we're talking with a guy from an organization called World Beyond War. And the name kind of tells you what the organization's about. We'll be talking about the human propensity for war and some of the myths about war and some of the economics of war and more. So I think you'll find this very interesting. Also, great music as usual. So here we go. Right now, let's meet my guest on this episode of Paradigms. Marc Eliot Stein, welcome to Paradigms.
Well, thank you.
You are part of an organization called World Beyond War, and I'd love to hear about the organization and what it does. The name is sort of obvious what the intent is, but what are your actual activities? And I want to talk with you just a bit about the phenomenon of war, this human thing. But let's start with,
Sure.
Tell me about the organization a bit.
Sure. Okay. It is an organization that was founded just about 10 years ago. Next month, we celebrate our 10th birthday. So we're a 10-year-old organization that was founded specifically to be, number one, a global organization, even though you can hear my New York accent, and many of us are from North America, South America, or Canada. We are very much focused on being global. And the idea is to define an organization for the express purpose of being against all wars, all institutionalized violence, all military spending, to never say, well, this war is a little bit good, that war, maybe we'll try a little war here, but to be definitively against war. There are a few other organizations that are very close allies with us. One is Veterans for Peace, people who were in the military and, today form some of the most important anti-war activists come from actually military service. So that's one. And there's another, which is Code Pink. Code Pink has a sort of, feminist focus, which is cool with us, but is not our focus. Veterans for Peace is veterans, but World Beyond War is simply generic, we're against war. If you're against war, join us. You don't have to be anything else. So I hope that helps explain what the organization is.
You're singing my song.
Great. I should also say we're small donor funded. We don't take money from big organizations. We certainly don't take money from countries because they wouldn't want to give us money because we don't like what most of them do. So we're all small donor funded. We really work on a shoestring budget with a small, very hardworking staff. We meet constantly and that's it.
And you're a nonprofit?
Yes, nonprofit.
And are the folks at the organization mostly volunteers, paid staff? How does that work?
Well, so I started as a volunteer. I should mention I'm the director of technology, so I'm a software developer. I started as a volunteer for about a year and then transitioned to staff. Most of us are paid, but I would definitely emphasize we're doing it. It sort of feels like volunteer work because many of us could be living more lucratively if we weren't devoting our life to anti-war activism. So I would say we all draw sustenance salaries, and I think that describes many of us because we believe in what we do. But, it's not, I would definitely never advise somebody to go into anti-war activism if your goal is to earn money.
Right.
But if your goal is to save the world, it's a great way to, you can make a living.
What are the activities of the organization?
We have really separated our activities into three pillars. One is actual activism, also known as organizing, which basically means, whipping up support from people, finding out where people are, what they believe, how we can appeal to them, bringing people into the organization, getting them to sign our petitions. And, another part of organizing is appealing to governments, appealing to Congress, appealing to presidents around the world. So that's activism or organizing. Another of our three pillars is education. And we have an education director who is actually, building courses. These are really mostly online courses, but there's a wide variety. And, when we're talking about education, we're talking about people with PhDs who know what the word education means. So that's another part of our organization. And the one I'm most involved with is media. I'm the website developer, and I also run the podcast. So I feel closest probably to the media pillar. And what we're trying to do there is really provide a counterweight to the massively influential pro-war media, which is just all over the world. So we feel like when we're doing media, I'm talking about website publishing, multimedia, YouTube, again, podcasts, billboards. We actually put out billboards, so that's also a form of media, and also media critiquing media as well as producing media. So I do feel when it comes to media, we're a drop in the bucket compared to CNN and New York Times and Washington Post, but I feel it's so important for us to be in that field.
Absolutely. Well, that's the organ by which people get their information and then make their choices.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it sure is. And yeah.
I'm talking with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War. We'll be back with more of this conversation talking about war. But first, some music. This is Jackson Browne's song Information Wars from his album Looking East. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life.
Give us 20 minutes and we'll give you the world. We bring good things to life. The news you need from people you can count on, doing what we do best. The heartbeat of America. Heartbeat of America. Your true voice. Your true voice. You're in good hands. You're in good hands. Now more than ever before. And in the flickering light, the comforting glow, you get the world every night. TV show, latest spin on the shit we're in, blow by blow. And the more you watch, the less you know. Beyond the 100 darkened living room, out where the human ocean roars, into the melting light that generations go. Us think we care about the planet, at the same time polluting and looting the only world we've got, so they can maximize their profit. heartbeat of America. The heartbeat of America. Your true voice. Your true voice. For the life of your business. For the life of your business. It's everywhere you want to be. Everywhere you want to be. And there's a front row seat for the precious few. The latest war as a pay-per-view. Famine and disaster right in front of you. And the more you watch, the less you do. Beyond the 100 million darkened living rooms, out where the human ocean roars, into the failing light the generations go, heading for the information
Information Wars. That's Jackson Browne from his album Looking East. Very important to know, where does our information come from and what is the agenda behind the information? All right, here's the next part of my conversation with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War. Let's talk about war. I mean,
Sure.
How many wars are happening on the planet right now? Someone recently said to me they think around 25 armed conflicts going on.
I wouldn't disagree with that. It's a great question. In fact, one thing we're talking about is, wouldn't it be great if we had a sort of ticker that could just provide at a glance information like that? Rather than say how many wars, what if we were to say how many conflict zones?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where obviously Gaza is a conflict zone. You know, I think you could say all of Israel and Palestine and Gaza is a conflict zone. Yemen is a conflict zone. Ukraine and the Ukraine border with Russia is a conflict zone. I would also say the United States border with Mexico is a conflict zone. I don't think that was necessarily true 10 years ago, but it's true today, and that's not good. So, you know, if we were to count the conflict zones, I think we would come up with, let's say, active conflict zones, not dormant, but actively violent conflict zones.
Including civil, like Myanmar.
Yeah, absolutely. Any time where violence is playing a role in social structures, I think we would call that a conflict zone or a war or a civil war. So, you know, personally, I try to avoid spending most of my time dealing with words, you know, words like what is a war? You know, if we were to count them, I'm pretty sure we would come up with a lot more than 25.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think 25 is a wrong number either.
Yeah, and I'm with you. We don't need to nitpick the definition. It's violence. It's human violence.
Right.
Some people say, well, it's always been this way. This is just how people are. There have been archaeological studies and into past societies that they came out saying we're not warlike, that didn't have wars, that didn't even produce weapons, you know, going back thousands of years. So modern history, let's say, you know, post-biblical history, the belief seems to be that war is just part of the human condition and it's always the way it is. A lot of people seem to think that. I personally just can't accept that. It seems so, well, honestly, foolish and limited and limiting. But,
yeah,
you know, and waste, it's the waste of life, of earth, of everything.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you can't accept that. I want to first point to the anthropological and archaeological evidence. Books have been written about this, and our executive director, David Swanson, has focused on this question more than I have. going into ancient history and determining that really in the past, violence was not necessarily as prevalent in society as is often believed. I mean, if you are to look at archaeological evidence, you just got so many centuries of, millennia of civilizations to look through, but many of them did suffer from violence, but also many of them did not. But let's step away from archaeology and just say that I can walk down the street. I'm in Brooklyn, New York right now. I can walk down the street with pretty much like 99.9% confidence that I will not be a victim of violence today. And that's because in a city where there are many diverse, different types of people, diverse religions, diverse belief systems. Here in New York City, we've got the wealthiest people and the poorest people. We all live together in peace. So if all of us in a city can live together in peace, I think we can project that to a larger community and say, what's going wrong? Why can't countries live in peace? Because people clearly can live in peace.
Right. I think that is actually kind of the most important point, which is it's something we're perfectly capable of. I'm a big fan of the archaeologist Maria Gimbutas, who wrote about the peaceful societies in what we now call Lithuania, and really got a lot of grief for it at Harvard as a woman in the 50s. And there's a film called Signs Out of Time about that. And that's just one example of a Neolithic society, a pre-Western modern history where they didn't have war. They were eventually invaded and by someone who did have war, but it's not necessarily just an intrinsic part of humanity, I guess is the point.
Absolutely. By the way, I'm interested in that author. I have done some reading on Lithuania. Fascinating history there. So I hope you'll put that name in the show notes.
I definitely will. And you can go on YouTube and look for Signs Out of Time. It's a film by Donna Reed and Starhawk, and it's wonderful.
Wow, great. I also want to mention that the nature of war changed for the worse pretty much about 110 years ago. I'm thinking of World War I, the years between 1914 and 1918. So I am a history freak. I bet you are too. I mean, I read tons of history. It's reading history that provided the substance behind my becoming an anti-war activist. Only when you read a lot of history can you realize how fraudulent most wars are and how ineffective most wars are. But I specifically want to say that in August 1914, and one of my very favorite books is called The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman, which describes how Europe made a terrible, terrible mistake of allowing their entire continent to fall into war in August 1914 for no reason, no good reason at all. When they began that war, they thought they were going to fight it with horses. When they ended that war, they were fighting it with concentration camps. Concentration camps first existed about 20 years before in the Boer War in South Africa, but the progress of technology that became evident in the 4 years between the beginning of World War I and the end of World War I believe that we shouldn't even use the same word war for war after that disaster, because war became so much more murderous, so much more impactful. It was, the invention of trench warfare was World War I. The invention of air warfare was World War I. So since World War I think we need a different word for it.
I'm talking with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War. We were just talking a little bit about World War I. Here's a song about World War I. It's called 1917. This is Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris.
The strange young man who comes to me, a soldier on a 3-day spree, who needs one night's cheap ecstasy and a woman's arms to hide him. He greets me with a courtly bow and hides his pain by acting proud. Drinks too much and he laughs too loud. But I deny it. Let us dance beneath the moon. I'll sing to you, Claire de Lune. The morning always comes too soon, but tonight the war is over. He speaks to me in schoolboy French of a soldier's life inside a trench, of the look of death and the ghastly stench. I do my best to please him. He puts 2 roses in a vase, 2 roses sadly out of place, like the gallant smile on his haggard face. Playfully I tease him. Hold me beneath the Paris skies. Let's not talk of how or why. Tomorrow soon enough to die, but tonight the war is over. We make love too hard, too fast. He falls asleep, his face a mask. He wakes with a shakes and he drinks from his flask. I put my arms around him. They die in the trenches and they die in the air. In Belgium and France, the dead are everywhere. They die so fast there's no time to prepare a decent grave to surround. Whole world glory, whole world fame. The old world's gone up in flames. Nothing will ever be the same, and nothing lasts forever. Oh, I'd pray for him, but I've forgotten how. And there's nothing that can save him now. But there's always another with the same funny bow. And who am I to deny them? Tonight the war is over. We are being useless. Lost in the Tonight the war is over.
That's a powerful song. 1917. That's from the Western Wall Sessions. Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. Wonderful record, powerful song. All right, now let's get back to my conversation with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War, talking a bit about war as an industry. We're talking about the Industrial Revolution, right? So war became an industry.
Yeah,
It became profitable. I mean, it had always been done for profit, but it became profitable on a whole different scale. And now, for the United States, for instance, war is an essential part of our economy. We arm both sides of conflicts all around the world, and that is the foundation of the U.S. economy, which I think most people don't realize.
Bingo. You put your finger on it right there. And that's why we have such trouble ending it, is because it is very profitable. And, let's go back in history. I think war has always been profitable for small groups of people, and war has also always been considered a respectable profession. If you read 18th century novels, you hear about soldiers with their mustaches and their fine uniforms, walking into town and impressing everyone. It's always been profitable. It's always been considered respectful, even though I don't think it should have been. But I want to really point to, once you had the phenomenon of aerial bombardment, for instance, while you could fire a cannon in the 19th century, the level of damage you could create in the 20th century was just so much worse that all of our concepts of honor in war really needed to change, but didn't. I mean, I think war became a lot less honorable when the death toll multiplied by hundreds of times.
Cities can be flattened. I mean, Dresden, Fallujah,
exactly,
Aleppo, Hanoi, and on we go.
Yes.
And then there's this term that gets used that I personally find to be an obscenity, which is collateral damage.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's obscene.
Yeah, and that's what we all are. I mean, that's what the victims are. So in Gaza right now, we're seeing the collateral damage. And in Israel on October 7th, we saw the collateral damage. In other words, the people who profit from war weren't the ones who got killed. It was the innocent civilians, people just trying to live their lives. And yeah, collateral damage is how it's written in the books.
Yep.
Those are the victims. Too bad.
And now we know, for instance, that Israel knew about the plans for October 7th a year ago and didn't take it seriously. There are things people overlook because of economic, political expediency. And you just have to stop for a moment and go, okay, people profiting from all this death and suffering, like how do you sleep at night if your 401k is funded by murder?
I'm so glad to hear you say these things because I feel like, I have a lot of trouble even getting many people to see it this way. But I guess I would go even beyond that and say the reason people can sleep at night with these 401ks is because, at least here in the United States, and I assume you have listeners who are not just in the United States, so I'll try to think more globally, but here in the United States, it's constantly imprinted on us that war is honorable, respectful, and good. And so it's very easy to just watch cable news and read, major newspapers and believe that by fighting wars, we are on the side of good. I mean, for instance, in the Israel-Gaza disaster, or the Israel-Palestine disaster, and I do like to use the word disaster instead of war sometimes, in that disaster, there is a belief, which I consider just ludicrously ridiculous. There is a belief that if Israel kills a certain amount of Hamas leaders in Gaza, that they will eliminate the problem.
Which is ridiculous.
So, have you read no history? Do you not know that you cannot subdue a population by killing its leaders? That just doesn't work.
In fact, it generates more violence and retribution and back and forth. Here we go, which the whole Israel-Palestine region is an example of.
It sure does. I mean, a friend, and I do have friends on all sides of this, referred to the phrase, I think he was doing it ironically, I hope, to turn Gaza into a desert or, what these types of phrases. And what I said to him is, if Israel were to continue to do what it's doing to the point of killing the entire 2 million people in Gaza, that still would not stop the movement, because the West Bank and Jordan and Egypt and Syria would then take the place. You can kill every person in a region and people in other regions will take up that cause. You cannot kill war with war.
Funny that, huh?
Yeah. It's funny But it's tragic that if you listen to the stated strategies of the Israeli government right now, which is backed by the United States and Joe Biden and Secretary Blinken, that the policy is actually to remove the problem of Hamas by killing its leaders. That is actually a stated policy. So the stated policy that the United States is backing is insane.
We'll be back with more conversation with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War and talk about what it's like to share your views about war with folks. Interesting conversations we all get to have, right? But first, some more music. We're going to start out with something called The Jewish-Arab Peace Song by Hagit Leibowitz. And you can find this on YouTube with the lyrics, and it's really a wonderful song written and performed by Jews and Arabs about peace. Here's the song. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life.
Hey! times before.
That's Susan Aglukark from her album White Sahara with Casualties of War. And before that we heard the Jewish-Arab Peace Song by Hagit Leibowitz. And now let's get back to my conversation with Marc Eliot Stein. I want to talk about how hard it is for people to take that position of, I'm on the side of all the humans, I'm not on this side or that side ideologically. What I'm noticing in this latest iteration of the Palestine-Israel disaster, that's a good word for it.
Thank you.
What I'm noticing in social media is I see more people, and maybe it's just because of who I see, but I'm seeing more people saying, wait a minute, both sides are wrong. This is all wrong than I have in the past. I don't think that's the prevailing ethos, but I feel like that's building. What do you think about that?
That's good. I am too. I would like to believe that what you say is true. I do worry a lot, though. Basically, what I worry about is that even though there does seem to be a rise in consciousness, and World Beyond War is feeling this, like we're doing better with donations this year than in previous years. Like there's definitely a rising awareness of exactly what you said, that we have to prioritize humanity as a whole. At the same time, if there is another event on the scale of, say, October 7th, 2023, September 11th, 2001, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in January 2022, or was it February? Sorry, I think it was February 2022. If there is an event of this scale, I believe it will have a negative snowplow effect of just pushing aside all the good that has been learned. I hope that's not true. I hate to state a pessimistic idea, but I do worry that there will be more events, more acts of terrorism, more invasions, more sudden, unexpected attacks by one nation or another, and that these will counter the good that you and I are both perceiving. I hope that's not true.
I hope it's not true, but I think it's actually a wise thing to be looking at so that people can think about, okay, there's going to be more, and how steadfastly can I hold to my belief of no war? Because every time there's another thing, the media pumps more righteousness into some side of it, right? And gives people more ways to justify. See, but this happened, so we have to go kill those people, and
yes.
To be able to hold to all the wars are wrong. I don't care who started it. I don't care what the ideological differences are. It's all got to stop. That's harder for people to stick with.
Yeah. Well, so I have my own branch of optimism. I don't really focus as much on what you're describing as, this rising groundswell of consciousness, which is an important thing. What I'd like to point to that people are not aware of is the successful history of peace negotiations, which is completely forgotten today. So, for instance, during the presidency of Bill Clinton here in the United States, he championed and worked on the Northern Ireland peace agreements in the 1990s, which were incredibly successful. So successful that now people don't even remember that the hatred between Northern Ireland and England was as intense as the hatred in Israel and Palestine. It really was. And 30 years later, we forget that how successful that peace negotiation was. Another is South Africa. You know, one of my favorite novelists is J.M. Coetzee, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but he's a South African white writer. He won the Nobel Prize. And, you know, by reading his novels, we get a sense of how bloody and terrifying and hate-filled the political environment was in South Africa before they actually solved it. So we have two places, Ireland and South Africa, where they had situations similar to Israel and Palestine today, and they were able to solve it. So when I point this out, I'm telling people something that they have no awareness of. Why are there no movies about the peace agreement in Northern Ireland? Why are there no movies, there's so many movies about war. Unfortunately, peace negotiations, while extremely successful, don't seem to get much attention in our media. And that's why people think that there's no chance for a peace negotiation in Israel and Palestine, whereas obviously there actually is. And all we need is the will for peace, and the negotiation will work itself out. Negotiation is not difficult. You compromise. That's what you do. You compromise. There just needs to be a will for peace.
I love it that that's your focus. I think that's brilliant and so valuable and important and duh. You know?
Well, thank you. It's nice to get positive feedback. Like I said, I'm in New York City. I'm of Jewish heritage. Believe me, I have a lot of arguments with friends and relatives, and most of them are more stubborn than you. I mean, I think you're on my side. I should say stubborn. You're on the same side, but most of them react with incomprehension sometimes when I say these things. So it's nice to speak to somebody who gets it.
I grew up during the Vietnam War, and I went to anti-war rallies when I was 8 in New Haven. So this has been part of my lifeblood. At that time in New Haven, it was the anti-war movement and the Black Panthers, and my family was involved with both. So this is my bread and butter in a way. But I get to feel like a freak a lot because people don't hold these attitudes, and people are uncomfortable talking about it. And you know, I have friends who, when October 7th happened, just went into total vengeful rage. And I get it. I don't condemn them for it. I understand it. But I can't go there. It's not that I try not to think that way. It's not how I think.
Right.
You know?
Similar. I don't end my friendships with these people, but some people I know, the things that they say are very disturbingly hateful. And it's because they feel so hated and so hurt themselves that they lash out with the same. I mean, we're just seeing an outbreak of hatred. War is an outbreak of hatred, and we're seeing it so much right now.
We'll be back with the final part of my conversation with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War after we hear this very beautiful and powerful song by Roberta Flack. Business Goes On As Usual, from her album Chapter 2.
Business goes on as usual. The corn and the profits are high, and TVs boom in every living room. They tell us what deodorants to buy. Business goes on as usual, except that my brother is dead. He was 25 and very much alive, but the dreams have all been blasted from his head. In a far-off land with a gun in his hand, he died in a war he did not understand. While business goes on as usual, there's plenty to choose from the rack, but rumor goes that the latest thing in clothes, the latest thing in clothes will be black. But business goes on as usual, as usual, as usual.
Roberta Flack from her album Chapter 2, Business Goes On As Usual. It's a very telling song. All right, here is the final part of my conversation with Marc Eliot Stein from World Beyond War. And then there's other things to acknowledge, like the death of a certain war criminal this week. Henry Kissinger died. And I think there literally is rejoicing around the world because he was the architect of so much death and suffering. And then I have my own beliefs about what drives all of this. I think, we're talking about how war is profitable and greed. And what I see happening in the world right now is that because of the state of the biosphere, which we have created, there's all this fear of basic instinctual fear of annihilation. And so people are scrambling to get as much as they can of whatever, because it makes them feel safe or whatever. And so people who have a lot are growing their hoards at the expense of everyone else, and kind of, so what? And I don't know that people are consciously thinking that way, but I think that climate change is a big piece of what's driving this increase in authoritarianism.
Yes.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I say that to people and they look at me like I have three heads.
Oh, it's absolutely true, and I believe this has been documented. So, I know I'm full of words today, but the word I have for this is fortress imperialism, the idea that the path for privileged, northern hemisphere white people, which is what we're talking about, that the future for them is to live in a armed fortress where the brown people and the global south and the poor people are outside the fortress, the barbarians at the gate, and we white people are inside the fortress. I call it fortress imperialism. I believe that's what Netanyahu is about. I believe that's what the United States is increasingly about. Building a world that doesn't encompass the entire human population, but really dissecting the human population into who is inside the fortress and who are the barbarians at the gate. And that is a future I do not want for my children, for anyone. That to live in an armed fortress at war with the other half of the world is a future we should turn against. I believe that's what capitalism is selling us right now, is a fortress.
Wow. So last question. What can people do who resonate with any of what we're saying to help us get beyond war?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much. You know, you brightened my morning here by having this conversation. Thank you for doing something by talking about it and for running your podcast. And I also want to mention I listened to another episode right before this, and I like what you're doing. So one
Thank
thing
you.
is to do what you're doing and express, you know, use the powers of expression. But I would say that if you're a person who really cares, but you have a whole life that you can't, you know, you don't have a lot of time to spend, I would really suggest getting involved with World Beyond War. Follow us on social media. Come to our events. It's all free. We want everybody to join us. So that's what I would say. Or join whatever local anti-war movement is in your group. Talk to your friends. Talk to your family. Read books by Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Dorothy Day, you know, and like learn about the peace movement. That's what I would say to most people. But then I would also say to people like me, so I lived an entire life earning a living, raising my kids as a software developer. And then I decided at a certain time, it was actually when my youngest daughter left college, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to necessarily have a job that maximizes my salary. Why don't I work for an anti-war organization? And so I approached World Beyond War. I went to them and said, please let me volunteer for you and let me help your website. And by doing this, I really changed my entire life. I made a whole bunch of new friends, you know, met people, including you today, that I would have never met otherwise. So if somebody has the freedom in their life and it's the right moment, then dive in like I did. Just dive all the way in. 10 years ago, I barely would have called myself an anti-war activist. Now it's my whole life, and I'm so happy it is. So that's what I would say is dive all the way in if you can.
Mark, thank you so much. Really a pleasure to talk with you. I love what you're about, and it's great to share ideas and to be seeing ideas put into action. And World Beyond War seems like a really great organization.
Thank you so much, Baruch. It really means a lot to talk to you today. Thanks.
Mark Eliot Stein, thank you so much for talking with me and for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was affirming and clarifying, and I love to hear what World Beyond War is doing, offering people opportunities to learn about being peacemakers. Isn't that really what it's all about? Focusing on making peace. So, Mark, thank you so much. And World Beyond War, thanks for the work you do. Folks, if you'd like to know more about World Beyond War, the website is worldbeyondwar.org. Check out their educational programs, their workshops, their podcast. Become involved in being a peacemaker. That's how we're going to change this. That's how we're going to move humanity away from war and cruelty and violence. Isn't that the ultimate goal? It's certainly one of mine. worldbeyondwar.org, a global movement to end all wars. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Paradigms and that you'll visit our website, paradigms.life. Check out the archived episodes going back 15 years. So many wonderful, inspiring guests. I'm going to leave you with one more song to close out the show. It's Third World with Peace and Love. And let's go with peace as our word for the week again, many weeks in a row. It seems important. Speak it, invoke it, intend it, learn how to be a peacemaker. All right, Baruch signing off for this episode of Paradigms. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next time with more inspiring people. Until then, be a peacemaker and be well.
Some for you, with a little bit of love. Listen. How long will you find yourself before you find you? Yeah. There's no need to fight yourself, 'cause the truth is you, just you. Can my ancestors' tears go down in vain? No, no, no.
You've been listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.